Now that we've covered the lessons on inflection and the Strong's Bible, the difference between a lemma and an inflected form should be extremely clear to you. So what I want to do in this screencast is to take that basic information and look at different kinds of searches in accordance. We're going to look at lemma searches and we're going to look at inflected searches. I've shown you bits and pieces of these kinds of searches in earlier screencasts, but I want to get into much greater detail in this one. We're going to use the default settings for accordance that we established in a previous screencast, so just go ahead and start up accordance. In one of our earlier times together, I talked about accordance's naming convention of its Strong's Bibles, and I just want to illustrate that. What accordance does is that it appends an S to the end of the module's name if it's a Strong's Bible. So for example, you could have an ESV or you could have an ESVS. Okay, and what I've encouraged you is to always to get the Bibles that are Strong's Bibles that have the S at the end. In the actual naming of the module, they don't use S. They talk about, for example, the English Standard Version with key numbers. So that's how they entitle these modules, but the actual name of the module will always have the S. And if you want to confirm this, just go up here and make sure that you've selected the Bible that you want to get information about, such as the ESVS. And then go up under the Accordance menu and choose About the Text. And you can see that this is the Holy Bible, English Standard Version with key numbers. So if you go, for example, down and get the Holman Christian Standard Bible and do the About Text, you'll see the same thing. Holman Christian Standard Bible with key numbers. As an aside, you'll notice as I pulled this menu down that you can go to the first 10 translations without having to first select the menu. The caret simply means the control key. So you can switch to the GNT by doing Control 1, and your next translation is Control 2, then Control 3. So it just makes it a little faster to get around the menu. You may wonder why my translation is not the Mounce S. And the reason for that is that it's only a translation of the New Testament, so we thought the -NT was a better way to distinguish that. The other thing you need to know about accordance and Strong's numbers is that their texts are tied to specific numbering systems. The text will be tied either to a Strong's number or it will be tied to the GK. Now my stuff, Verlin's Word Study Book, they're all tied to the GK number. Most of the other resources are tied to the Strong's number. For example, if you just do a mouse over on Gate, and you look down in the instant details, it tells you that this is GK 4783. Okay, my text is tied to the GK numbers. If you do a mouse over on Gate in the ESV, you'll see that it's G4439. Okay, so the ESV and the HCSB and those are all tied to Strong's, but I'm tied to the GK, and that's what the little GK in the Instant Details box is telling you. In fact, if you go over to Gate in my translation and triple click, you're going to bring up my dictionary, and that's because my text, my translation, is tied into my dictionary. And you can go over and you can see the two numbers. Poulet is GK number 4783, and it's Strong's number 4439. If you're on another Strong's Bible, let's say the ESV, and you triple click on Gate, it opens up a totally different dictionary called Greek Keys, loads in the Strong's number 4439, and gives you the definition of poulet. Now, this may not always be the case with accordance, but it is certainly the case of it right now. So you just have to remember, the Mounce stuff uses the GK, as does Verlin's Word Study Book. And then all the other Strong's Bible use Strong's numbers. So don't get your Strong's and your GK numbers mixed up, okay? Let's get a little deeper into lemma and inflected searches and maybe show you a few new things you're not aware of. Let's load in Matthew 5:14 and we'll use that for these searches. So the verse reads, "You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden." Let's do some work on the word city. Well, if you want to see every place the word city occurs, then that's really obvious, isn't it? We need to switch over to searching for words, and you can either click on the Words tab, or if you want, you can use the keyboard shortcut. So to switch to words, it's Control-Command-W, and then switch back to verses, it's Control-Command-V. So we'll do a Control-Command-W, type in city, and do the search. In the Mounce translation, the word city occurs 111 times. Now it's kind of interesting. Let's switch to the ESV and do the same search. And you can see that city occurs 117 times. In other words, there's 6 places where Dad and I do not use the word city that the ESV does. So let's find those places and ask the question of why the difference in translations. I'm going to go back to the Matthew 5:14 search, so I'm going to go over to the history and choose Matthew 5:14. Notice that it knows that's a verse search, and so it switches that. We can do the search again. And let's do some Lemma searches, but Lemma searches based, obviously, on the Greek behind the English, not the Greek itself. Go ahead and do a mouse over on the word city, and do a control click or a right click, and choose the first option, search for, and then word. Now I hope you noticed that Accordance actually opened up a new tab. Sometimes it's easy to get lost in these tabs. You can always click on the first tab. But what it did was it searched all of the Mounce translation for the English word city. Okay? There's your 111 hits. So let's go back to the original tab, but this time we're going to do a right click, but we're going to choose key number. Now this is absolutely critical. What this is going to do is it is not going to do a search on the word city. It's going to look at the Greek word that we've translated city. It's going to look up its key number, which in my case is the GK number, and it's going to look up every place that that Greek lemma occurs. So this is a lemma search or a dictionary search, but it's searching the Greek, not the English. All right, so go ahead and do the search. And what you find as you look in the upper left-hand corner is that this Greek word is word number 4484, and it occurs 163 times. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So the Greek word that is translated city in Matthew 5:14 actually occurs 163 times. Even though we remember when we did the search through the Mounce and the ESV, the number was considerably less than 163. This is getting interesting, isn't it? In other words, the Greek word that is behind the English city, and let's just do a mouse over to make sure we know what that is. It's the Greek word polis. Its GK number is 4484. That Greek word occurs 163 times in the New Testament. So it obviously is being translated in some way other than with the word city in both the Mounce and the ESV translation. Okay. Another way to do a key number search is to go back to my translation and triple click on the word city. It opens up my Concise Greek Dictionary over in the zone to the right, and we're going to go over, and where it says GKG 4484, click on that GK number. What it just did was a key number search through my translation, and it found 163 places where the Greek word polis occurs in the Bible, regardless of how we've translated it. And when you go to Matthew 2:23, for example, it says, and he went and settled in a town called Nazareth. Oh, there you go. One of the reasons why the numbers are different is that polis doesn't mean just city, it means a town. Now it's interesting to go get the ESV and compare. And if you do a mouse over on town, you can see that the ESV translated city. Now why the difference? Well, as Dad and I looked at Nazareth and what it was in Jesus' day, and what we understand the word city to mean, what kind of picture does the word city get in your mind? Well, the city is a pretty large area, isn't it? There's a lot of people in a city. There were not a lot of people in Nazareth, if my memory doesn't fail me, that we think that it was about 600 or so people that lived in Nazareth. It wasn't a city, it was a wide spot in a road. Well, that's what we use the word town for. But then when you go down to Matthew 4:5, you can see that it's the holy city, which is Jerusalem. Well, Jerusalem certainly was a city. But then you go down into Matthew 8:33, and we thought that this city really was much smaller, where the herdsmen lived, and so we translated it town. This shows you why it's so important to be able to search on the Greek that's behind the English. Again, what you're looking at is all the places that Paulus occurs, and you can see how we've translated it and how the ESV translated it, or any other Strong's Bible you want to pull up. Now, if you go back over to the Concise Dictionary, and this time click on S, which is Strong's Greek number 4172, which is the Strong's number for Paulus, then you get the same search. This is showing you every place the Greek word Paulus occurs, but this search is hardwired into the ESV. So if you don't have an ESV, you're not going to be able to do this. It's one of the reasons I encourage you to buy the ESVS. But if you have it and you click on that number, then you're also getting another lemma search, another key number search for the word Paulus. And again, you can go get some parallel texts and kind of compare them and see, for example, what the King James does. That's city, city, city. Yeah, they pretty much stayed city here. As I've said repeatedly, Accordance wants to accommodate itself to how you like to use a Bible search program, and that's why it gives you all these different ways to do the same thing. Another way to do a key search is simply to go up to the search box and make sure that words is selected and type in bracket key space G, and let's say 0025 close bracket. This is the Strong's number for agapao, and so you can see over in the ESV window all the places that agapao occurs. Now, if you were doing this search in my translation, because it's keyed to the GK numbers, you have to go G0026, and then it looks up all the examples of agapao in my translation. If you try to search for 0025 in my translation, you're only going to get one hit, and that's because in the GK numbering system, 25 is a totally different word. So just remember, my stuff and Verlin's is GK, everyone else is Strong's. Now I want to focus on doing some actual searching in Greek. So let's clear off a couple of these tabs. So we just have this simple screen. And here we can see the mounts, GNT, and ESV. Let's go up here and say we want to search the GNT. And let's go to Matthew 5:14. Even if you're not comfortable with Greek, watch the highlighting. You can be reading in the English and it's highlighting the Greek for you. So when you do a mouse over on city, you can see that the form in the Greek text is Paulus. Look down at instant details and you can see that this is GK word number 4484. But the important thing here is that you can see what Greek word city is translating. And so if you keep an eye on the Paulus and then just move the cursor over to it, then you can select Paulus. Again, even if you're not really comfortable with Greek. Now you should note that down in the instant details, when you do a mouse over on the Greek text, the information is a little different. For example, they're not going to show you the GK or Strong's number. They figure if you're working with the Greek text, you don't have to deal with the number, so that's not there. But it's the basic lemma and inflected information for that word. But let's do some searching on polis, okay? So go up here and say we want to search on words. And you'll notice that the font changes to Greek. The reason it does that is that you've got the GNT selected here. If you had an English text selected, then it changes the font to English. So accordance is automatically changing the font in the search box. But we want to search on the GNT, so we'll hit a Control-1 to switch it back. And this time type in polis. It's kind of nice, you don't have to worry about final sigmas. Accordance knows that it's a final sigma, so it writes it as a final sigma. And when you do the search, what you have is a lemma search. This is the default search in accordance. Okay, it's not going to do an inflected search, it's going to do a lemma search. So here are all the places, all 163, that the word polis occurs in the New Testament, regardless of the inflected form and regardless of how it's translated in the different translations. So here we have pollen, which is an accusative. Down here we have polis, which is a nominative. Now let's say for some reason you wanted to type in your accent. You go right back to before the omicron, and if you don't know where on the keyboard the accent is, one way to find it is to go to Window, Character Palette, or Option Command 6. And here are all these Greek characters, and so you can just click on the acute, close out the palette, and then do your search again. Now it found exactly the same 163 hits. The reason is that by default, as we've said before, accordance ignores things like accents when you do searches. Ignores accents, breathings, iota subscripts. If you want accordance to take the accent into consideration, then go up to the search box and type double quote equals signed polis close double quote. Then when you do your search, you're only going to find examples of the inflected form polis that has an acute accent on the omicron. Let me remind you also of another important feature. Let's say you're wanting to search for the Greek word that means city, and you remember that it's P omicron lambda, but you can't remember anything beyond that. Just type out what you know and do your search. It'll tell you that Paul isn't a Greek word, and so it goes and gives you a list of all the Greek words, and you go down, oh, here it is, polis means city or town. Click on it once, and then OK. And now you could do your search again. But what if you don't want to do a lemma search? What if you want to search for a specific inflected form of the Greek word polis? Well, let's go back to the beginning so we can see this. So go to the Mount's translation. We're going to do a verse search, and we're going to go to Matthew 5:14. And what you're interested here is not so much finding every place that the Greek word polis occurs, but you want to find out where this specific form, where polis occurs. So what you do is you go over to polis in the GNT text, and you do a right click or a control click, and this time you want to choose inflected. You do your search, and what you're shown is every place that P omicron lambda iota sigma occurs. And it's in 22 places. Now you notice the coding in the search box. You can do double quote equals polis double quote and do your search and get the same information. This would be for pretty specialized word studies where you want to see how an author uses a word in a very specific form. There's one more specialized search that I want to show you. So let's clear out the extra tabs and let's go to John 3:16. Let's say that you were wanting to do a more complete word study on loved. And you know that the verb is agapao, but you also know that there's a noun form of agapao, it's agape. And in fact, you may not know this, but there's also an adjective form. If you want to find all examples of all the words that are related to agapao, and by related I mean share the same root, what you do is go back to agapesin, but this time you search for the root. It opens up a new tab and has found 320 hits. And as you start to look at these different examples, and I'm going to bring up a English translation so it'll help you see what words mean. The first example is agapetos. This is an adjective. If you look down at instant details, the dictionary form is agapetos. It means beloved. Then you have agapeses, which is a verb, and as you keep going down, you keep seeing more and more of these that are verbs. There's another agapetos. This is what a root search does. It looks at the Greek word. It asks, what is its most basic element, which is the root? And then it says, are there any other words that share the same root? And the reason I went to agapao is that we not only have a verb, but we have a noun and an adjective. And so if you're wanting to look not so much at what the verb agapao means, but what the agap root means, then you do these root searches. And this is pretty interesting. You can get some good information when you do this kind of search. Oh, by the way, these are also called cognates. Agapao, agape, agapetos. These are all words that are formed from the same root, agap, and so we call them cognates. It just means they're formed from the same root. As you're looking at all these examples, you may see all the verbs and you go, no, let's get rid of the verbs. I want to see what other words are included. So all you do is go up to the search box, Command-Shift-N for a not, and then what you want, there's several ways you can do it, but just do bracket, verb, bracket, and then do your search. Now you're down to 10. You've said, show me every place that the root agap occurs, but I don't want to look at the verbs. And here is your adjective, here is your noun. And as you scroll through, you see, okay, that's everything. There's nothing else other than a noun and an adjective. But I want to go back to the root search and show you another very, very cool function of accordance that will really help you in your word studies. So go back to the plus agape, that's the code for a root search, and do your search. And now click on the analysis button. And for right now, just say show default details. This is an amazing piece of programming that will take you deeply into how words are used in the New Testament. If you click on the first tab, this is a graphical representation of all the places in the Bible that the root agap occurs. And it's also live. So you go through here and go, well, look at all of these hits. Wonder where this is. If you double click on the graph, it actually takes you to the text. Well, I was in 3 John 3. And you can click around and see other ones as well. If you go over to the analysis tab, then it tells you that there are 320 total words that share the root agap, or as Accordance has it, agape. And it's the verb occurs 143 times, the noun occurs 116, the adjective 61. But this is just the beginning of the fun. You can click over here in the upper right-hand corner, and you can say, well, show me the analysis graph. Now, what this is showing you is, in this case, it's set the gender, so it's showing you the hits broken down by gender. Well, what if you want to break it down by lexical form? You just choose that option. And now you can see all the places that agapao occurs, agape occurs, and agapetos occurs. This is really, really powerful if you want to get deeply into your word studies. And so you can choose other options down in this menu as well. Well, let's just click through these different options. The analysis bar chart gives you the same information, but in, as you would expect, a bar chart. Go up to Lex for lexical form, and there's your bar chart for the different words, all formed from the agape root. So you can have a pie chart if you'd rather, a table bar chart, and these are just options that you need to play around with and just enjoy. Now, probably one of the more important options is the concordance option. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And because these three words occur so many times, by default, it's just showing you the references. But you can say, you know what, I want to see the actual verses themselves. So all you do is go up to Display, Set Concordance Display, and you go down to Display Thresholds. What this means is that it's going to give you the text excerpts. In other words, it's going to show you pieces of the actual verses as long as the word occurs in less than 50 verses. If it's over 50 verses, it's just going to give you references. Well, let's change that to 100 and click OK. And now you can see that what you have are the concordance kind of text snippets where agapetos occurs. And so this is a way to get a Greek concordance very quickly. Let me show you a preference that will control what comes up by default. If you go back to your preferences and go down to search tabs, you can see in the bottom half of the window, this is showing you automatically what comes up when you choose the analysis button. And so if you always want to have a concordance showing, or if you always want to have a bar chart showing, then just go ahead and select these here and they will come up by default. Of course, even if you want something different when you go to it, you can still choose in the upper corner and choose whatever you want. Perhaps all that Greek information is a little overwhelming. Well, the analysis button also works with an English text. So you go back to my text, and we need to search for the word love. So we're going to go to the Mounds translation, search for love, and then click on the Amplify button. Show the default details. And let's make this a little bit bigger. Get rid of a couple of the older tabs. And click on Analysis. And I will just choose the defaults. Now you have a different kind of information. If you choose the hits graph, it's the same kind of information you saw before. But when you go to Analysis, what it's showing you is, for example, the word love with a capital L occurs 10 times. 4 times it's the verb agapao, 4 times the noun agape, and 1 time it's a totally different word, philistorgos. And then love that is not capitalized occurs 209 times, and here's the spread for all the different Greek words. And you can go down to any of these options, but let's choose concordance. And by the way, if the text is too small, then just choose your display and under font size, say like medium, and it's a little easier to read. So here are text snippets of the 10 verses where the word love occurs capitalized and the word love lowercase occurs 209 times. So that's above the threshold. So if you want to see them, you can go and change, just say, 210. And now you can have a concordance in English. Pretty cool, huh? If you are really into word studies and really wanting to know more about biblical concepts, I would encourage you to spend time with this analysis button. It's overwhelming in the amount of information that it has, but it's really good information, and you can watch patterns and usages and things like that. In closing, I should probably mention one last way to search where you can easily distinguish between lemmas and inflected forms. Set your search to the GNT and search for words, and then go under the search menu, and you can choose either enter lexical forms or enter inflected forms, or Command L or Command J. So let's start by entering a lexical form. And you want to search for the verb agapao, but let's say you have forgotten how to spell it or you can't remember where the omega is on the keyboard. You just start typing A-G-A-P, and you notice the scroll area to the left is moving, and you go, oh, there it is, agapao. You click on it once, and then OK, and that enters agapao into the search box, and so you can do your search. But let's say you wanted to look for an inflected form. You do the Command J, and this time it's all the different inflected forms in the currently selected text. And so let's say again you wanted to type AGAP, and here are all the different inflected forms, and I don't know which one you may want to look for. How about a second person singular, agapas? So you select that and say OK, and it does your search. Now there's two of them. And again, notice what accordance does. If you want to search just for a lexical form, you type in the word agapao and do your search. But if you want to search for a specific form, and let's make it easy, we'll just copy this text. But this time you're going to do quote, paste, quote, and do your search. And you're only looking for that inflected form, and this particular one only occurs once. Now that we're done with all this, you should be completely comfortable with the difference between searching for a lexical or lemma form, doing a key number search, and searching for an inflected form and knowing the difference between the two. You should also be very comfortable with the difference between searching for an English word and searching based on the Greek word that lies behind the English. Very good. Congratulations.